Hey everyone, Carl here with Littleroot Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Calyrex Shadow. As you may have noticed, we upgraded. I don't have a background anymore. I finally figured out how to work all this crap. Updates aside, if you like what you see, remember to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, do all the YouTube stuff for us. Leave a comment down below who you want to see me cover next week. We have a very special frog coming up in Friday's episode of the Deep Dives, so look forward to that. But for now, let's focus on Calyrex Shadow and its very oppressive nature when it comes to being a hyper-offensive Pokemon. So Calyrex Shadow is what we would define as the hyper-offensive threat of Series 10 and Series 8, where you're trying to do as much damage as you possibly can in about a short amount of time with just overall spread moves and just sheer speed and damage. Unlike Zacian, which can kind of play this weird, bulky pivot role, Calyrex Shadow is looking to stick around on the field and deal as much damage as it possibly can in the short time it's going to be there. It's very much like Spectrier was in Series 9 and 7, where you are looking to deal as much damage as you can with your special attack and just get as many boosts as possible and just snowball through your opponent's team. Looking back through Series 8 meta, Calyrex Shadow was very popular among the restricted Pokemon choices. I know Zacian was a very popular pick alongside Kyogre, and then Calyrex Shadow is there like usually in the top 5 if it wasn't in the top 3. Currently it is ranked 4th among all restricteds in Series 10, behind Xerneas, Zacian, and Kyogre. And as Series 10 has started to develop, and as players have started to navigate away from Xerneas, Calyrex Shadow is kind of fit in the bill of this hyper-offensive threat to deal as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. Usually focusing on Life Orb builds or Spell Tag builds, which we'll get into all that stuff here in a minute. But Calyrex Shadow is just kind of proven to be this, even though you have a 4x weakness kind of thing, you can still do well in a format and overperform when needed. Common partners for Calyrex Shadow tend to be redirectors. Things like Volcarona and Indeedee Female. Tapu Lele, even though it doesn't have redirection, is a good partner as well, just because you get Psychic Terrain and things that way. As a Psychic Ghost type, you really fear getting hit by those Dark type and Ghost type moves, so Pokemon that can deal with Incineroar, Galarian Moltres, opposing Calyrex Shadows, things like that, Pokemon that can deal with those are going to be very good partners as well. Dark Urshifu, Water Urshifu, Mind Shell is really good into Incineroar. Both Landorus' forms are good into Incineroar and Galarian Moltres. So when you're team building with this thing, make sure to have plenty of answers to opposing threats for your Calyrex Shadow, because Calyrex Shadow is the linchpin of your team essentially. When we're looking through moves for Calyrex Shadow, the big one that comes to mind is the signature move Astral Barrage. For those that may have been living under a rock, Astral Barrage is a very powerful spread ghost move that deals a ton of damage to your opponents. If I remember correctly, it picks up Okos on anything that's not really invested to try and take it, because you just get to do Life Orb boost and stuff, and then you get a special attack boost and you just snowball from there. Outside of Astral Barrage, you get to do things with like Protect and Expanding Force, which is another powerful spread move that gets boosted on Psychic Terrain. And as the format has started to kind of accept Wide Guard as a common used move, we see things like Shadow Ball, Psyshock, Mud Shot, Dark Pulse, Energy Ball, all these weird coverage moves down there. Other things that Calyrex are starting to do is trend towards the more kind of setup style play. Things like Nasty Plot, Trick Room, Substitute, Trick, and things like that. We have a really cool Choice Scarf Trick set coming up in the move sets that I'm really excited to talk about. Other unique things we see here is things like Psychic, Draining Kiss, which is really, really cool. Just like Draining Kiss helps you against those dark types if you need it. Mudshot was played in Series 8 a ton to give you access to Max Quake. Obviously, that's not as great anymore, so it's seeing a lot less use. Looking at common items, though, is where we kind of start to see the divergent paths for Calyrex Shadow. Life Orb and Focus Sash tend to be the more popular items, and they're more consistent, I would say. You get to do your Astral Barrage thing, your Expanding Force thing, then you kind of just protect when you need to, and that's about all you do. With the Choice Scarf set, though, we get to do cool things like trick it onto opposing Mons, and kind of just mess with our overall game plan. Force switches if they're locked into a status move of some sort and they need to do damage and things like that. So it's just kind of a cool trick to use. Other items here are things like choice specs, which just boost our damage exponentially and just over the top, just looking to snowball. And then spell tag, if you're interested in not taking a ton of life orb chip, or kind of want to hide your item, spell tag's this cool little niche thing where it just boosts your ghost type attacks. And you get the boost on your Astral Barrage, which is the move you care about, but you also don't reveal that you're not life orb. So your opponent has to play around, are they sash, are they some other item, and kind of play that guessing game. When you're building with Calyrex Shadow, it's very hyper-offensive in nature just because of the way it's set up and the way its stats line up. So your teams usually have tools for guaranteed speed control and protecting your threat, which all play towards Calyrex strengths. Calyrex Shadow's base speed after investment is like 220, which is a lot. One of the things when you're building with Calyrex Shadow as well is to make sure you have answers to dark types, like we mentioned in the partners little slide over there. A lot of Calyrex's partners are answers to dark types. Volcarona is a really good one, Water Fu, Dark Fu, things like that. And a unique strategy for Calyrex Shadow is to kind of play this bait and switch game like the Xerneas players have started to adapt to. If you can get your opponent to commit to OHKOing Calyrex Shadow and instead protect your Calyrex Shadow, switch it out, and then take out the threat, you can bring your Calyrex Shadow back in and then set up and do all your powerful Calyrex Shadow things. Looking through movesets for Calyrex Shadow, it's item-based for the most part. If you're Life Orb or Focus Sash, you kind of are looking to do Astral Barrage, Expanding Force, Protect, and then Life Orb usually carries Substitute nowadays just to kind of dodge attacks as a second Protect because you're already chipping away at your health and it's not going to benefit you to try and click Nasty Plot or anything like that. Whereas the Focus sets get to do that Nasty Plot thing because they know they live at least one hit, and if your opponent doesn't have a ton of pressure, you can always click that Nasty Plot and get miles ahead of your opponent. As for the Choice Scarf set, it's kind of just this weird, cute thing. I know I've seen it on ladder a couple times where they just trick Choice Scarf onto an opponent, and if they can't do that, then they get to click Astral Barrage or they get to click Fast Shadow Ball. You can also click Protect and then switch out and play that bait and switch game and try to get pivots and get into a good position. But most of the time, you're going to see these Life Orb Focus Sash sets just try to take over a game. When you're looking to beat up Calyrex Shadow, it's very weak to Snarl, so either a very fast Snarl with like Scarf or Tailwind and a very bulky Snarl in the form of like any of the legendary dogs, Galarian Moltres, Umbreon, and Incineroar are usually really good tools to have on your team. Speed control is also very important. If you can get the speed advantage over an opposing Calyrex Shadow, you will be able to pick it up most of the time before it can pick up you. Calyrex Shadow isn't the bulkiest Pokemon, so it usually goes down to a good double up of neutral hit plus powerful physical hit usually will be enough to take it out once in a while. And Wide Guard is a good option to have for your team, especially against like Calyrex Shadow, Xerneas, and Kyogre. But most Calyrex Shadow are starting to trend towards preparing for this in the form of like Shadow Ball, Psychic, Leaf Storm, Giga Drain, Energy Ball, things like that. So it's not a foolproof plan. So don't expect Wide Guard to just be the end-all be-all answer for your Calyrex problem. So what have we learned about Calyrex today? For all its speed and power, Calyrex Shadow does have some big weaknesses that can be exploited. Like we mentioned, Snarl, it's also really weak to Sucker Punch. Any ghost type move like Shadow Sneak's also really good against it. One of my favorite calcs is currently Choice Band Sizer with Brittle Swing. OHKO's Calyrex Shadow if it's not Sash. It is hilarious to do. And it's kind of just spurred on a lot of this fun shenanigans of trying to team build for it. However, that does mean you need to position a little bit better. Calyrex Shadow, being a hyper-offensive threat, usually doesn't like taking a bunch of switches because you get Grimnay boosts when you get a knockout. However, sometimes it is a necessary evil to switch out if you're in a bad position and then try to regroup and get into a better spot for your Calyrex to take over the rest of the game. And remember, speed control is super duper important playing any hyper-offensive team, and it's even more important for Calyrex Shadow. Definitely make sure that you have either your Tailwind, your Anti-Trick Room, Electro Web, Icy Wind, however you're controlling the speed, make sure that your Calyrex Shadow is protected and healthy all the time. And with that being said, I want to thank everyone for hanging out and listening to me ramble about Calyrex Shadow today. Remember to check us out on Twitter. All of our links are there on screen. Check out the Discord. The Discord link is down below in the description. And remember to do all the YouTube stuff, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. It helps us out a ton. And with that being said, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, we're out in the world, and we will see you all on Friday for Toxicroak. Bye, everyone.